So we got a little time. Since we got a little time, I thought we would start in on I Love This Bar by Carolyn Brown. Yes, it's after the Toby Keith song because it's the Honky Tonk Cowboys series, which is a funny, witty, heartfelt, and sexy. One of the best books I have read lately, hence all the paper clips. You know what kind of rating this is going to get. This series has pumped up the fun, love, romance, passion. She doesn't need anything but her bar. Daisy Odell has her hands full with hot-heads, thirsty ranchers until the day one damn fine cowboy walks in and throws her whole life into turmoil. He's looking for a cold drink and a moment's peace. Instead, Jared McElroy finds one red-hot woman. She's just what he needs if he can only convince her to come out from behind that bar and come home with him. Enough sass to keep you entertained page after page. Fresh fiction. Rollicking romance full of unpretentious rural charm. The Romance Studio. Guaranteed to leave you countrified and satisfied. Love, romance, and passion. So let's start this book, see how far we get, and I guarantee you're going to enjoy it just like I did. I am on the third book, but it's not the final book in this series. There's a holiday version I've got to get that I don't think has even hit the shelves yet, but I'm hoping it's in my next shipment of Harlequin Christmas books. It says, to my fabulous editor, Deb Worksman, and we're going to start at the first paperclip. Okay, page 10. How old do you think Daisy is? Billy Bob asked. Jared raised an eyebrow. Who? Daisy, the barmaid who owns the Honky Tonk. Ruby, the woman who built this place, left it to her when she died last year, Billy Bob said, so her name was Daisy. That sounded like a redneck barmaid's name. Jared took another long look down the bar at her, and he'd never been so attracted to the woman the first minutes of meeting her. The word thunderstruck came to mind, but he didn't believe in such folderol. Daisy tried so hard to hear the answer that her head pounded. She blamed it on the fall, and could she have strangled Joe Bob for choosing the minute to yell at her to drop a beer? Jared didn't even try to mask the calculating stare. Aunt Mavis would just have to understand, and after all, it was just looking. The woman had the body of a kickboxer, so no fat cells anywhere, and could be anywhere from 16 to 29. When her gaze met his, sparks lit up the room between them. Her steely blue eyes dared him to answer the question. The physical attraction was so strong that his first knee-jerk reaction was to flirt. His second was to run. His third was to trip her, catch her when she fell, and kiss her just to see if those lips were as soft as they looked. No way she'd seen 30 yet. There wasn't even a tiny little crowfeet wrinkle around those beautiful eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back into a ponytail that swished when she moved from one end of the bar to the other, swiping the spills, filling orders, and wore a white tank top with sparkling jewels sewn on the front, along the neckline, the tight jeans hugging her hind end. Her eyes looked like they could cut a man apart with a laser gun, and those lips were definitely made for kissing. Nice full lips that he could have been on commercial for lipstick. So, Billy Bob asked. It took a minute for Jared to remember what the question was. His hands were clammy, his voice husky when he asked, why you asking? Page 10 and 11. Page 12. Because Jim Bob is a happy piglet in a fresh mud hole when he can talk Chigger into going home with him on Friday and Saturday nights. Joe Bob would be Merle's slave if she'd teach him all she knows about shooting pool. Daisy Odell is a dream gal. I'd probably rob banks or kill for her, Billy Bob said. What's that got to do with how old she is? Jared asked. I was just bringing up conversation around to her, man, so I could tell you how I feel about her. She's a looker and owns this bar. Now that's a combination that could get a man's heart just plumb aching. Just don't go getting any ideas that you might waltz in here and do some serious flirting with her. When the time comes for her to get all serious, it's going to be with Billy Bob Walker. So you didn't care a whit about what my Uncle Emmett? You came over here to take a leak on the bar and stake a claim? Jared asked. Billy Bob chuckled. Guess I did. Daisy pretended to come at the tail end of the conversation. You guys gotta go to the bathroom, do it in the bathroom. Oh, honey, you know I love you, Billy Bob said. You'd marry Lucifer's sister just to get a bar of your own. Billy Bob Walker, love, ain't got a blessed thing to do with anything. Hell's bells, the man you and your brother spit in here could buy a bar on your own in a year's time. Go on up the road to Trio's or the Boar's Nest and buy one of them if you want a bar, she smarted off. You need a refill on the beer, she asked Jared. No, I reckon one's good enough if I'm going to drive back home, he said. He wished she'd argue with Billy Bob some more. Her voice was like maple syrup with a touch of wild turkey, fiery and sweet. He wondered if she'd be like that, of course, in bed. Good God, he had to get control of his thoughts and stop letting them romp all over the bar. Which is where? Daisy asked. North of Huckabee, west of Morgan Mill, right next to the Walker Ranch, Jared said. Want to go with me? He was thinking. He touched his forehead. Did he have that slight concussion that caused all his thoughts to go wallow in a gutter? Billy Bob waved a hand between their gazes. I'd build a bar for Chigger and Merle. They're regulars at a honky tonk. You promise me and the boys that they'll change over to Walker Roadhouse, and I'll build one across the road and buy out the Trio and the Boar's Nest to eliminate the competition. Daisy cocked her head to one side. Walker Roadhouse? Yeah, that's the one, kind of the one I had in mind to change the name. I talked you into marrying me, he teased. Better not hold your breath on that issue. You look like hell in the shade of blue. I'm running this bar until they carry my old cold dead body through those doors, and I'll have my fingers wrapped around a long-necked bottle of Coors when they do. And honey, this honky tonk will always be. Ruby left that in her will, no name changes, so you just scoot your boots on down the road and put in some competition, she said. Billy Bob chuckled again and picked up his beer. Never know what the future might bring. I'm going to find a sweet little thing and dance away part of the beer I've done drunk. Jared, you tell Uncle Emmett that we'll be over and see him someday soon. He says he headed toward the jukebox. Maybe that would make Daisy jealous, and she'd see he was quite a catch. After all, Billy Bob and his brothers owned the Bar W and the most prosperous ranch in the Earth County, and Jared might be a shade better looking, but not by much. And neither was his bank account nor his pickup truck was as big as the Walker boys. That was page 12, 13, and I'm reading 14. Besides all that, Emmett wasn't going to be worth a damn in a couple of years. Mesquite was taken over, and his stock was worthless. By the time Emmett croaked, the Walker men would probably pick up the whole ranch for next to nothing. One thing for sure, if they did, they'd turn it around mighty quick. That ranch had been cream of 2 counties back when Mavis was still alive. It would take time and hard work, but it would double the size of what the Walkers already had. Yes, sir, Daisy would wake up some day and see the wisdom in tying the knot with old Billy Bob. He wasn't in any hurry. He waited 7 years. He'd wait a few more. Back up at the bar, Jared downed the last of his beer, picked up his hat, and slid off the stool. He scanned the floor in case someone had sloshed beer out of their mason jar. He wasn't letting a blast of physical attraction overrule his better sense. Like that song playing on the jukebox, they all got prettier at closing time. That's Mickey Kelly. Sorry, had to do that. When a man was drunk off his butt. Some were pretty, some looked like hell, but a barmaid was always a barmaid, pretty or not. What in hell could I be thinking anyway, he asked himself. I've got Emmett to take care of, a ranch that's fallen apart at the seams. I wouldn't have time to date even if she wasn't a barmaid. Don't be a stranger and tell Emmett we miss him, Daisy said, breaking into his thoughts. Jared looked over his shoulder. You know my uncle? Damn it, there was those sexy eyes. I wonder what they'll look like right after, and he stopped his thoughts. She stopped herself from thinking the next words. She cleared her throat and said, I overheard Billy Bob mention Emmett. He and Mavis used to come in here every Saturday night. He had a draft beer, and she had a long neck Coors. They were almost as good as Poole as Merle Avery is. Truth is, I was a little surprised that Emmett didn't take up with Merle after Mavis died, she said. Probably because she's too damn smart for that, Jared said. He's just as old as cantankerous. God only knows how it will be when we get that old and can't do what we once used to do. We might be hard to live with, too. Hard to live with would be all right. Downright mean is another thing. Well, tell him hello from Daisy. Jared just nodded and headed for the door. That was page 14 and 15. Page 16 is a small paragraph. In an attempt to keep his mind off Daisy, he thought about his third fiancée. Emily had a business degree and was head she-coon in the admissions office at Oklahoma State University. He figured the third time was a charm and that Emily would be with him right up to quote-unquote death do us part. 2 months before the wedding, she got a job offer to go to New York and expected him to leave the ranching business and go with her. After the argument, she went, he stayed, and after a third engagement ring was tossed into the dresser with the first two. So they both have kind of a history that prevents them from believing in a long-term relationship. Page 21. Was Jason McElroy married? How long did he intend to stay with Emmett? Why in the hell had he come to Texas anyway? Damn, she swore, this is ridiculous. The biggest question was, why in the devil was she interested? Every kind and shape of testosterone had come through the doors of her bar, and not one of them had made her think about breaking her rule number 1 in Ruby's agenda. Men were not allowed in the apartment. Okay. Page 31 and 32. Never said where we were going means that that's where you said that's where you were last night. How'd you like Miss Daisy? She's a fine lady, ain't she? Her just as well as I did Miss Ruby, only Ruby was a wilder sort. Jared could scarcely believe his ears. Emmett McElroy had just said 5 sentences without cussing or ranting about something. He actually paid Daisy a compliment, but if Emmett said Daisy was a fine lady, then it must meant the Alzheimer's was getting worse. Daisy was a barmaid. Period. End of story. He put a package of cheese crackers and an apple in a brown bag, made himself a gallon-sized cooler of iced sweet tea, and then headed out the back door without another word. His mother had warned him that he'd have his hands full with Uncle Emmett, and Jared hadn't known what hands full was, and that was an understatement until the time of the first day of creation. He slapped the steering wheel of his truck, then, damn it all anyway, how was he supposed to get that woman out of his mind if he had to see her again? To admit that he didn't want to go would just cause Emmett to set his mind even more. The only thing that he could do was go out and sit in the back corner with that until that old fellow was ready to go home and pretend that he had a wonderful time. If Emmett ever thought for 1 second that he was miserable, he'd just insist on Jared taking him to the Honky Tonk every single night. Shoot me graveyard dead if I ever get Alzheimer's, Jared said out loud, and he started the engine of his truck. That was page 32. Page 33. What are you thinking about? The cowboy I promised to keep my hands off? Chigger asked. Ruby Lee, Daisy said. Chigger nodded seriously. Miss her, do you? She was like a mother to me. Took me in when I was down and out, Daisy said. You were the daughter she never had. It was a two-way street. You were good for her, Chigger said seriously. Thanks, Daisy murmured. Okay. I want to see if we can get to at least page 50. This is page 35. How'd you rationalize it then? Chigger asked. Become friends, fall in love, marry, have kids. Traditional, I suppose. First it was friends, so that nipped that whole process in the bud. Jared could never be friends with a barmaid, so the fall in love part was a moot point. The waitress brought their tea and salads. Daisy didn't realize how hungry she was until she started to eat. The salad and toasted garlic bread tasted wonderful. I reckon each person has to find their own way around the L&M words. You do it your way and I'll do it mine. If you ever find out you don't want the cowboy, honey, you will be upfront and honest with me. I'd like to have a taste of that tall drink of water before I settle down with Jim Bob, but only if you decide you don't want him. I won't get in your way, Chigger said. Who says I want him? Daisy asked. Your eyes say it all. I'd like to strip him down and have him for supper and then maybe again for breakfast, but I'll be good at least until you meet with Mama. Chigger, you are 35 years old. I wasn't afraid of my mother or Ruby Lee either, and I was only 21 when Ruby Lee hired me. I had you figured out that you'd take on a rattlesnake barehanded, Daisy said. Rattlesnakes ain't nearly as mean as Mama. Don't use your southern manners when it's time to leave. Don't you dare say something like come up and see me sometime. She'll bug the hell out of me and want to go with me on Friday night. What about if she asks what kind of work I do? Chigger got serious. Here's the story I told her, and I met you one day when you came to town to get your hair done. You were married to a rancher, and you got 2 of the cutest little girls. You introduced me to Jim Bob, who is a good, God-fearing man. And sometimes he comes over to your house and we play Monopoly. We don't play cards because that's a sin right next to converting your neighbor's butt, which I never understood anyway. I mean, if your neighbor ain't married and he's got a fine butt, then why can't you covet it? Daisy giggled. And your husband's name is Jared. Good God Almighty, Daisy sputtered. I just thought of that this morning. Pretty good touch, ain't it? And as far as she knows, I spent last night at your ranch last night like I do lots of Fridays, and since you need to come to town to buy some vet supplies today, I suggested you run in and meet Mama. I told her that you couldn't stay long. Running a dairy farm takes a lot of time, Chigger said. Daisy's Irish temper flared. You planned this whole thing. Been planning it for months. Good story, ain't it? And if you don't play along with it, I'm going to have wild, passionate boom boom with your cowboy tonight. That's blackmail, and he's not even my cowboy. Daisy said, call it whatever you want. You'll have plenty on me to do some blackmailing after today, believe me. Daisy raised a perfectly arched eyebrow. Oh? Oh, yes, and I'll even sweep up the floor again if you play nicely. That is worth more than sweeping up a bar and a chicken fried steak, Daisy grumbled. Chigger shrugged. I'm sure it is, but then what are friends for? We're not friends. We're business partners, Daisy said. Honey, that's the best kind of friends, Chigger said. By the time they finished lunch and Daisy drove 20 miles to Stevensonville and pulled her car into the driveway of the white frame house where Chigger's mother lived, she was ready to strangle this woman. Chigger twisted her hands nervously as they walked onto the porch. You remember the whole story? I got it, and I'll improvise if I don't, Daisy said. Page 35, 36, and 37. Moving forward. Page 45. If Ruby had been a surrogate mother, then Amos had been the same as a father. I can take care of myself, she said as she made change for him. Don't doubt it for a minute. Taught you well, me and Ruby did. I'm just asking who was the father. Or who's that feller? Daisy sighed. His name is Jared. He's kin to Emmett and helping him out from what I hear. Why you asking? Just hadn't seen him around. Ruby said for me to keep an eye out on you, and he keeps stealing glances over this way. I might be old, but I damn sure ain't blind. I know what he's got in mind. He ain't respectful. You just motion me, and the boys will put him out of here on his butt. Daisy patted his arm. He's just harmless rancher, and putting people out on their butts is Tinker's job. She nodded toward the door. Page 46. Daisy did her best to ignore McElroy party in the back corner, but when Chigger drew up a chair and sat down between Emmett and Jared, a green jab of jealousy shot through Daisy's heart. You had better stop this nonsense right now. He's one hunky hot cowboy, but he's not for you, is what she's telling herself. How do you know? That annoying little inner voice added. She was quick to shoot off a silent answer, because any man who'd have that kind of control over me could hurt me, and it ain't happening again. A few minutes later, Chigger opened the swinging doors at one end of the bar and stepped into the area. I'll borrow you for a few minutes. Emmett wants to see you. Tell him to come up here to the bar. This is my job, not yours. Chigger picked up a white bar rag and wiped up a puddle of foam. He's using a walker, for God's sakes. Don't be hard-headed. I can do this job for 5 minutes, and besides, I still owe you. Mama put you through the ringer, and worse than I figured she would. Daisy finished the draw she was working on, then took the customer's money and nodded at Chigger. She was reminded of the old song that had been one of Ruby's favorites by Ray Price and was still on the antique jukebox. It had a line in it that said the longest walk he'd ever take would be across the floor. If it hadn't been Saturday night, she would have been unplugged in the fancy new jukebox and plugged in the old one. But the young crowd came here to hear the upbeat, newer country music on Friday and Saturday nights. Ruby had always said that folks didn't give a damn if music came from the jukebox or a band. They just wanted a good time, plenty of beer, and room to wiggle around their dancing or shoot a little 8-ball. She'd been right. That was 46. 47. Here's 48. Where did I mark it at? The Honky Tonk drew more business than lasted longer than any other joint within 50 miles. Miss Daisy, Emmett exclaimed when he looked up and he saw her elbow. You still running the Honky Tonk with a steel hand, I see. That's right, got my bluff in on them early, and they're still all afraid to test me. Besides, Tinker puts the fear of God into most of them rabble-rousers, and she laid a hand on Emmett's shoulder. You keep it that way, darling. Want you to meet my nephew, Jared. He's moved down here for me to wait to die so his family can inherit my place. Good God, Uncle Emmett, Jared exclaimed. Well, it's the gospel truth, Emmett said. Jared's face lit up like a neon sign. I'm not a gold-digging bastard. You're making me sound like one. Oh, we all know that he's just Josh, and Billy Bob said. He's going to leave that spread to me, ain't Emmett? Emmett grinned. Now, Mavis said Jared's dad was to have it, and I wouldn't want to take that woman on my bad side for eternity. Miss Daisy said a spell talked to me. I hear Jared's come visiting last night. Did he behave himself or flirt with Chigger? Daisy didn't sit down. He was a good boy. What I like is that Jared has already prejudged Daisy. and he already knows that he's not going to fall in love with her, so he's put her in this category when he hasn't even taken the time to get to know her and to find out if being a barmaid is really the only thing she does. Sometimes you got to dig a little deeper to know somebody, not just prejudge and be wrong. Page 52. Okay, we can see you were just teasing so don't get your dander up, cowboy, so why are you here to help Emmett? Daisy asked. She's talking to Jared now on page 49. He wore his jeans just right, bunched up from the bottoms to the top of his cowboy boots. They'd been dusted off after a hard day's work. His blue knit shirt fit snugly over a broad expanse of a chest and was tucked into a waistband of his jeans behind a silver belt buckle with a bull rider on the front. It was engraved, but she didn't let her eyes linger long in that area. That's the general idea. Good. He shouldn't be out there alone, she said. Why not? Jared asked. He's too tough for anything to hurt him. Emmett nodded. First thing he said that I can agree with. Jared's dad thought I needed help, so he talked me into letting Jared come on out here. God almighty, ever since he got here, he's been talking idiot notions about windmills, computers. The craziest thing is that he wants to bring a jackass on the property. Settle down, Emmett, Daisy said sternly. Don't be working yourself up into a frenzy. That all caused a stroke, and it ain't never had any death in the honky tonk, and I ain't planning on one now. Everyone went silent until Emmett chuckled. She's a sassy little thing, ain't she? She likes my Mavis. Reminds me, Daisy, that I looked on the calendar. You need to make a visit to the ranch. It's time you can eat supper with us, not tomorrow, but the week after that. I'm going to hold you to it, your word. You've been promising me that for years, that you'd hire someone else. Sunday is my day to get things done around here, she said. Woman is only good as her word. And you said that you'd be glad to help us until I could find someone else. Ain't no one else I trust. You're telling me that your word ain't worth crap? Emmett asked. Daisy had been concerned, and the only way out of this was straight ahead. My word is good as gold, and you cantankerous old goat. I'll eat if it makes steaks and baked potatoes and corn on the cob. I'll bring dessert. Cherry's cheesecake? Emmett asked. You got it. The one from the freezer section at the grocery store. It'll have time to thaw out on my way. I've got to get back to work now, and you be good and don't be starting any brawls. I've run a decent place here, she said. I could still whip anyone in this joint, Emmett said. No doubt one bit, but if you feel the need to fight, you go get outside and I'll throw your sorry butt out myself. I won't even let Tinker do it. I don't abide by brawls, and you know it, Daisy reminded him as she headed toward the bar. Jared watched her go from the corner of his eyes. Damn it all to hell with a silver platter. He'd never get her out of his mind. Even with that visual firmly implanted there, she heard Emmett telling the guys that Ruby didn't allow fights in the honky tonk either. She couldn't make out what Jared said in response. They all laughed loudly, and Emmett went on to another story. She wondered if he had anything to do with Ruby, and would have loved to listen in, but there was entirely too much noise. That was 48, 49, 50, and 51. Let's see here. Looks like we can go to page 52 tonight. 51. Chigger handed off the bar rag and she'd been using to Daisy. That Emmett was always a pistol. Mavis kept him in line. Now that she's gone, he's running wild, so to speak. I wouldn't take Jared's job for all the dirt in Texas. The way I figure it is, when a person gets that old, they just become a bigger whatever they were than when they were young. If they were sweet and kind, they become kind of old folks that you can't do enough for others. If they were an idiot like Emmett, then it intensifies and they were unbearable old people. How do you get to be so smart? Daisy asked. Fixing hair. I can fix a girl's hair for prom and tell you what she's going to be like when she's 80, Chigger said. So what's Jared going to be like when he's 80? Daisy asked. Chigger giggled. I knew you were interested. I shouldn't tell you, but you got me on my mama's good side, so here it goes. Jared's got tunnel vision. When he sets his eyes on a woman, that's the only one he wants, and he'll see her for the rest of his life. But he's got Emmett's genes in him, too. That means there's a hell of a lot of fire and temper. And Jim Bob? Like a bag of old cuddly teddy bear, Chigger winked. Then you ain't going to seduce him? Daisy asked. Who we talking about? Jim Bob? I don't have to seduce him. He's ready all the time. You know who I'm talking about, Daisy said. Jared, I gave you my word, Chigger said. You know what I think? Chigger smiled. That I flirt with lots of men, but I go home with just Jim Bob and have for this past year? You are a clairvoyant witch, Daisy said. Maybe so, but when Jim Bob finally catches me, he'll think that he's won the lottery, Chigger said. Daisy slowly shook her head from side to side. Were you ever as wild as you claim? Oh, yes, ma'am, every bit as wild. That red-haired cowboy tamed me pretty quick, and, honey, he's just as wild as I have been, so he can't ever play goody two-shoes with me, and I just don't want him to think that I'm a pushover. If he has to work for the goods, then they'll be a whole lot more valuable. Daisy narrowed her blue eyes. You never mentioned you intended to seduce Jared, did you? It was just a story to go get me to meet your mama. Chigger shrugged. Guilty as charged. Gotta go protect my cowboy now from the other women. Don't get mad. We're friends now. We wouldn't have been if you hadn't met Mama. That was page 51 and 52. Well, let's go to 54, 55. I'm having so much fun. At midnight, she turned around to find Jared leaning on the bar at the far end. She made her way to him, filling a couple of other orders as she went. What can I get for you? Nothing. I'm just taking Uncle Emmett home. He's tuckered out, and I guess just wanted to tell you that you don't have to come for dinner that Sunday. He'll forget all about it by tomorrow. The Alzheimer gets worse every day. He argued with a stop sign. I swear he would. Daisy could have listened to him talk for hours. His deep voice mesmerized her. Her eyes were half closed, and a smile tickled the edges of her full mouth as her imagination ran rampant. Would his voice ever go deeper if he had been in bed with her and whispering sweet things in her ear as he nibbled his way to her lips? Did you hear me? He asked. Sorry, my mind was somewhere else. She blushed. I gave my word, and I'll be there. I was joking about the beef steak, but I will definitely bring cheesecake in case he remembers. It's no trouble. I'll just pick it up at the grocery store. I'd rather you didn't. What did he mean it was time for you to come out there? He asked. It isn't your ranch and what goes on between me and Emmett. You don't want to be there for dinner. That's fine. Go somewhere else while you're staying away if you don't want to be there. Jared just shook his head. Don't call it dinner. It's supper. He'll really go off on the deep end if you call it dinner. That's the noon meal. And I'm there because he needs my help. My dad will probably sell the place or give it to one of his grandsons when Emmett's gone. It's the old way of thinking. He's just holding on to what he knows. Why aren't you going to keep the ranch? I just don't want it. I refuse to let it dry up and blow away, but I damn sure don't want to live in this godforsaken country, and you got that right about him holding on to what he knows. He won't let go of a damn thing. Guess I'll see you a week from tomorrow. That's your choice. I'll be there. You decide you'll be there or not, she said. Sassy piece of baggage, aren't you? I am what you see. He let her have the last word and made his way through the dwindling crowd for the door, where Emmett was shuffling along with his walker. In the plural sense of his word, he had his aluminum walker surrounding him, Jim Bob Walker, and on the other side Joe Bob on the other, and Billy Bob held the door open. Jared wondered if he wouldn't solve a whole lot of problems if he went back to Oklahoma and let Emmett bequeath his ranch to the Walker brothers. That was 54, 55, and 56. She stared across the floor when a hard pounding on the front door caused her to change of course in the middle of the room. Before she took 2 steps, they hit the door again. This time it was harder and longer. She swung it open, expecting to see a Mingus citizen with a cat that had been hit on the road and needed to either be sewn up, bones set, or put to sleep, but she hoped it wasn't the latter. She still got misty-eyed when she had to put an animal down. You didn't even ask who was here. You got a death wish or something? Jared asked. What do you want? It's none of your business and what I do. Uncle Emmett left his wallet on the table back there. I told you'd find it and I'd come back tomorrow, but he can't sleep until it's safe in his hand. I asked him what was in it, and he said Aunt Mavis's picture when she was a young woman. Well, come on and find it, she said. Jared went straight for the table. The wallet had been kicked back against the wall. He held it up for Daisy to see. He damn sure didn't want her to think that he invented an excuse to come back to see her that late. He tried every argument in the world to keep him from driving 15 miles back to that honky tonk at 2:30 in the morning. He'd been sound asleep when he heard Uncle Emmett yelling at him from the bottom of the stairs. He thought the old guy was sick or had fallen. Adrenaline had shot through his veins like lightning, and he hadn't even remembered how he got to the living room, but he could have strangled Uncle Emmett when he heard that commotion was all about. Can't sleep, so I wanted to talk to Mavis, and when I do, I look at her picture. It's at the Honky Tonk. You go get it right now, Emmett said. I can't go back there now. The place closes at 2 o'clock. Besides, that bartender will find it and put it up for you, Jared had argued. Daisy just isn't just a bartender, boy. She's a fine woman. Why, one time your Aunt Mavis even said she'd make you a wonderful wife. You could do a hell of a lot worse in this world than Daisy Odell. I wasn't being snide or condescending. That ain't what I heard. I heard you say bartender like it was dirty. When he exhausted every excuse in the world, he dressed up and gone to retrieve the wallet. Now he felt pretty stupid standing there with it in his hands. Lock your door and ask who's there before you answer it, he said. That was page 56, 57, 58. Don't tell me what to do. You aren't big enough to stop someone from hurting you. Good night, Mr. McElroy. She said no more and locked the door and started back across the dance floor. When he knocked hard again, she slung the door open. This is not funny. You need to ask. You need to mind your own business. What if I'd been drunk and rushed inside to hurt you? Try it, she said. He took 2 steps forward only to find a sawed-off shotgun pressed up firmly against his ribs. He held up his hands in surrender, and he left one still holding Emmett's wallet. How'd you do that? I told you not to worry. I can take care of myself. Just remember that it's loaded at all times. The permit to have it is posted right there on my license right behind the bar, and I'm not one bit afraid to use it. Did you ever have to? He asked. Not only was Daisy full of sass, but she was brassy as hell. Not at the Honky Tonk. Now go on home and take Emmett his picture. Bar is closed at 2 o'clock, and I'm too tired to play games with you, she said. What do you mean, not at the Honky Tonk? He asked. That's my business. Good night, Jared. She showed him out the door and locked it behind him. She went back to the apartment and pulled a bowl of Lucky Charms cereal. Lucky Charms. 2 words that she didn't really believe in anymore. A person made their own destiny. Their choices brought their consequences. Luck was a figment of someone else's imagination. Charm, well, some folks had it. She, like Emmett, did not. She'd always figured that she'd used up her share of luck when she landed at the Honky Tonk, and she'd never been accused of having much charm. That was her mother's claim to fame, so charming that she had 3 husbands and too many boyfriends to count. She died in a car wreck at the age of 37. So she filled her mouth with cereal and looked at the leprechaun on the front of the box as she chewed. Suddenly the critter had Jared's face. She moaned. She had to get him out of her mind, or else she was going to drive herself as crazy as an outhouse rat. That was page 58 and 59. Well, let's see how much longer we can go here. We'll try to get up to page 86 so this book binding doesn't break. Page 66. Shh, he can't hear on the phone if there's a noise around him, Chigger said. Well, let the old codger sleep if he's too stubborn to leave the air conditioning. Jim Bob flipped the phone shut. Chigger looked at Daisy. He was talking to Jared. He let us fish in his pond, and Jim Bob is asking him if he wants to go with us. Chigger looked at Daisy. No. You did this on purpose. You are a witch from hell, Daisy said. Chigger winked. You are a fickle friend. You just agreed with Jim Bob that I was the smartest thing ever either of you saw. I did not agree with him. I didn't answer at all. That's agreeing. You didn't disagree. Daisy looked down at her scuffed-up cowboy boots, the worst pair in her closet. Her jeans were short, like Chigger's, cut off so short that the pockets hung below the denim. Only Daisy's had paint blotches on them, as well as dirt and sweat. Her red cotton halter top was faded and speckled with paint, too. Chigger grinned. If you don't like that cowboy, then why does it matter what you look like? Thank you so much, Daisy grumbled. Jim Bob stomped the clutch and put the car in first gear. Well, I think both of you are sexy as hell in those get-ups. Fish will come up to the top just to cop a look at the 2 of you, prettiest woman in the whole state. Chigger kissed him on the cheek and whispered something in his ear and caused him to chuckle. Daisy looked out the window and wished she'd shot both of them with her sawed-off shotgun. All that sweet talk and love cooped up in the cab of a truck when she couldn't even shake a vision of Jared from her mind was downright sinful. That was 66 and 67. 68 and 69. You going to pout all afternoon? Chigger yelled when the music stopped. Daisy nodded. Chigger laughed. She heard a truck in the distance and grimaced as Jared parked his shiny white truck next to the old one. "Hey, everyone, looks like you're already set up," he called out. He wore bibbed overalls over a white gauze undershirt, and the overalls were faded and worn, but that didn't make her feel a bit better about the way she looked. He gathered up the fishing equipment from one side of the pond and slowly made his way to her quilt. In that get-up she looked like Daisy from the old Daisy Dukes of Hazzard television show. The reaction from his fickle body had to sight of her standing there with one hip cocked out, sweat glistening on her body, and those long shapely legs made him damn well glad he was wearing baggy overalls. "Why are you pouting?" he asked. "Who said I'm pouting?" "Chiggers did, and said I was to come over here and make you laugh." Daisy glared across the pond. "Where's the bait?" "In the zip part of my purse," she said. Jared threw back his head and laughed. "What in the devil are you doing it with in your purse?" It wasn't funny, but his deep laughter was infectious. At first it was like a schoolgirl giggle, and then it was full-fledged laughter, blending with his and floating on the wind across the pond. "You did good," Chigger yelled. Jared gave him a thumbs-up sign. "She's got worms in her purse," he shouted. Chigger and Jim Bob both got tickled. "I couldn't toss out the quilt and hold them both. When I put them down, they started to wiggle back into the earth, so I put them in my purse. You got a problem with that?" "No, ma'am," Jared just chuckled. 68 and 69. Page 70. "Didn't know that you and Chigger were fishing buddies," he asked. "She's my worst enemy," Daisy said. "Then why are you spending your Sunday afternoon with her?" "That's $6 million question. How's Emmett?" "I wanted to bring him along, but he said Sunday was a day for resting, and that I was crazy to go out in the heat when we had good cold air at the house and fishing in the freezer. Back when I was a kid, he'd spend the whole day out in the heat. Didn't even have air conditioning on the cab of his tractor. Come in covered dirt and sing Hank Williams' song, grab Aunt Mavis around the waist, and dance all over the kitchen with her. Old age isn't for sissies. It's tough," Jared said. Daisy nodded. "He went down fast when Mavis died." "You got older relatives like him?" Daisy shook her head. "Nope. Mama died in a car wreck at the age of 37. Granny died when she was 45. My folks didn't have long enough to live. Do they got to be sissies or not?" "Your dad?" Jared asked. "Army, died before I was born." "I'm sorry. You are all that's left?" "You're looking at it, except for one cousin up in Mena, Arkansas. I've got this big family up in Payne County, Oklahoma. 2 brothers, mom, dad, nieces, nephews, even 2 great-nephews, all ranching folks," he said. "So why are you here? As in here today or here permanently?" "Both." Page 71. "Aunt Mavis took a shine to me when I was a kid. She and Uncle Emmett didn't have children, so they kind of adopted me. She wanted my dad to have his sorry excuse for a ranch, and Uncle Emmett finally agreed to let me move in and help. I'm the only one of Dad's 3 sons without a wife and kids, so it was easier for me to move in with him and help out," Jared said. "What makes it for a sorry excuse for a ranch?" Daisy asked. "I guess Aunt Mavis got too tired to make Uncle Emmett work at it a few years ago, and it needs updating to be productive. The land is good running cattle and making hay, but not if we don't control the mesquite. Good ranching requires a lot of hard work." "What would you do different?" "Windmills, for one thing. Save a bunch of money if we harness the wind that blows down here all the time and use it for electricity to run pumps for water and irrigation. It would raise the value of the ranch. We've been using them for a couple years now. A donkey for another," he said. She turned her head quickly. "A donkey?" "Sure. They hate coyotes and mountain lions. They're nature's best protection for new calves in the world. Let something come into pasture, threaten the calves, and the donkey will take care of it faster than you would with that sawed-off shotgun." "I know, but I just figured you'd be one of those all-business types who wouldn't think about natural protection. Why wouldn't Emmett want to get one? They don't require much upkeep." "It's not his idea. Then God forbid doing anything that wasn't his idea first," Jared said. That was 70-71. Page 85. "So tell me what you think about Daisy. Chigger is dying to get you 2 together," Jim Bob said. "She's a pretty woman, but just not for me." Jared said. "Why?" Now listen to this part, folks. This is when you're prejudging and you talk it over with good people who are good friends. Set you straight. "She's a barmaid, and she's not one bit attracted to me. A matter of fact, I think she hates me. Ain't no use wasting my time, and besides, I've got all I can handle with Emmett, trying to get the ranch back in working order. I just plain ain't having time or energy for her." "Yep, she can be a handful, all right. It'll take a strong man to tame that one. I see the way you look at her. You got bit, old man, by that lust bug, but you probably couldn't keep up with her anyway. She's out of your league," Jim Bob taunted. It won't work, Jim Bob. Give it up, and besides, since when is a bartender out of my league? Now listen to that. That's page 85. 86. I can tell Chigger I tried, and believe me, Daisy's a hell of a lot more than a barmaid. Jared chuckled. Tell Chigger you gave it your best shot and leave it at that. Now, he's going to find out that if you paid attention to the front of the book, that Daisy does more than just barmaid. But some people think that, preconceptions or notions, rather than really finding out what more about the person is wise, and it's not. It just shows that you're a butt. Okay, let's see here. We're going to go to page 98 and stop for tonight. 95. You had a funny look on your face. Don't you eat red pepper? Jared nudged Daisy. His touch was damn sure hotter than the red pepper coating on the fish. Whatever is on it is wonderful, and it's perfect. I didn't mean to have a strange expression. It's just that the last time I had a Sunday supper like this was when Ruby was alive. Sometimes the cycle gang would gather up at her house and we'd cook. I miss that, Daisy said. Hopefully they all believe her and then not read her real thoughts in her head. Who was Ruby? Jared asked. Chigger answered, you missed something when you didn't have the privilege of knowing Ruby. She was a hell-raiser who probably had the first one in the line when the women threw their bras on the bonfire. She had her own person and didn't give a damn what anyone thought of her. She picked up a hush puppy and her fingers bit into it. Jim Bob picked up off where she left off. Ruby built that honky tonk. She was raised in a little town out over East Texas and wound up in Fort Worth or Dallas with an aunt who died and left her a wad of insurance money, so she decided to put it in a beer joint and got just as close to the county line as possible. She built 1 foot inside the legal limits. Then she bought the other big sign on the sign out on the highway. Before long she was running the best joint in the county. I thought it was just only a joint in 2 counties, Jared said. Why would you think that? Daisy asked. The sign, I guess. I didn't see any advertisements for anything else. 96. Lots of joints have come and gone in and around Mingus over the last 40 years. There are empty buildings with the signs of them to prove it, and there's still the Boar's Nest and the Trios Club up on the road from the Honky Tonk. Trio has been there 50 years and just a little less than the Honky Tonk. Its claim to fame is live entertainment, unescorted ladies that get in free on Sunday nights, Daisy said. Why don't people go there? How can they just be like that much trade and support for 3 joints? It seemed to me like everyone in the area was at the Honky Tonk, Jared said. People always like to have a good time and have for years. Mingus was the first place to find it. Used to be that there were more honky-tonks and beer joints than a person could shake a stick at, Chigger said. You ever watch Cheers, that old sitcom on television? Uncle Emmett never misses it. Well, folks like me, Merle, Walker boys, have always had our favorite place, which is the Honky Tonk, just like Norm and his bar stool and Cheers. So I find a different crowd if I went up a few miles down the road, Jared asked. Hell yeah, Jim Bob said. Trio has live entertainment, and I heard they even have free hot dogs on Sunday. The Honky Tonk ain't open that night, so they get all the trade then. Why doesn't the Honky Tonk open on Sunday or have live entertainment? Daisy answered. Ruby said that folks don't care if it's a human singing or the blues or a jukebox. They just want to have a drink, dance, shoot pool, have a good time. I live by that rule. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And said that even a bartender needs a 1 night off. So that's why Billy Bob doesn't put in another joint. So there's already 3 in this area that will support, Jared said. You got it. Plus he wants a honky tonk because he always gets Daisy. Plus he wants the honky tonk because he always gets Daisy that way. You know what she says. The only way she'll ever leave the place is when they drag her cold dead body out the door, and she'll have her fingers wrapped around a long neck bottle of Coors when they do, Jim Bob said. So a man takes you and the honky tonk or nothing? Another shrug. Pretty much. That's why old Billy Bob is just the woman for her, Jim Bob said, and then jumped. Ouch, why'd you kick me, Chigger? Because I don't think Billy Bob is the man for her. Why, don't you like him? He's my brother, and he's just like me. And you like me, Jim Bob said. Of course I like you, darling, but Billy Bob isn't half the man you are, and Daisy is my friend. She deserves someone as good as you are. A wide grin split Jim Bob's face. Let's get the cleanup done, and I'll give Daisy a ride home, Jared said. Daisy pushed her chair back, all washed, stacking them up by the sink, and Jared run along and get Daisy home before midnight. She might turn into a pumpkin or a witch if you don't, or maybe even a cute little Chigger, said. Daisy interrupted. No, I'll just turn into a barmaid. Sure about the dishes, Chigger? Chigger winked broadly. Oh, yes, I'm very sure. You two run along. I'll take care of this little job while Jim Bob gets a shower. And that was page 95, 96, 97, and here's 98. Daisy came very close to blushing. Okay, well then, thanks so much for the day and the good supper. We'll do it again, I promise, Chigger said. Not if I see you coming, Daisy thought. See you later, she said. Well, this is just a short little paragraph on 116. The words to the song are getting to me. The lyrics seem like they're talking right at me, Daisy said. Honey, that's because country music talks to the heart. Ruby loved it, and so do I. It's to life told in a song. It ain't none of that newfangled stuff that an orchestra behind it that doesn't say much. Daisy nodded. You got a point, but Gretchen Wilson's Redneck Woman makes a statement, too. Yep, that girl is going far. She's got enough pure old country to get her there. She's a modern day for me and Ruby. We were redneck women a hell of a long time before that cute little thing made a record. We could have written that song for her, Merle said. That's the gospel truth, Daisy asked. Well, this is short, too. 127 and 128. Billy Bob must have had a hankering for Travis that night because the next song was Where Corn Don't Grow. Daisy remembered the CMT video of the song and related to Travis wanting to get out of that town where he grew up. She wanted the same thing, too, but a couple years later she was right back in Mena, Arkansas. And that's when the weeds really got out of hand, she muttered. Daisy had loved that song the first time she heard it. It figured that if the corn didn't grow in the fields, then weeds did. A person had a choice of what they cultivated, corn or weeds. Billy Bob cut through the crowd of the bar. What were you talking about weeds for? I need more money if you're not going to marry me and make part of me owner of this beer joint. She handed him a fistful of coins. I'm not buying you off. This is the last of the free music. Besides, you have more money than I do. This is my payment for a broken heart, remember? 128. Sure is. You just got a con man. You're just a con man, Billy Bob. You don't love anyone. Don't play any more Travis either. Choose something else, she said. I'll find something to make everyone want to drink more beer. By the way, I heard you were two-timing me with Jared on Sunday, and he even let him bring you home. I was hurt that you and Chigger didn't invite me to go fishing, and you never even let me take you home. She pointed at the jukebox. Go play your music and dance. I wasn't two-timing you, Billy Bob. I'd have to be one-timing you to do that. Well, that's your choice. Mine is that I'm a one-timing you already. Then you go two-time me with someone who gives a damn, she told him. He clamped a hand over his heart and screwed up his face. My heart is broken with your cold words. He chose George Strait's old song, I Cross My Heart, and Daisy wished to the devil she hadn't told him to play something other than Travis. Damn you, Jared, she said, and she looked at that shut door. Well, we'll stop right at page 136. We got a great big hunk of this book done, so that's really good. And we've got more pages to go. But this has been an amazing first read of I Love This Bar. For me, that I don't drink, but what makes me read this book and draw me in so much on this one is because he has preconception notions that he thinks she isn't good enough for him. She can't see her life anywhere else but running the bar because that's what her friend left her. So she feels like her life is attached to that bar because that's her job and that's her duty in life. So will he realize that she has more than just one job in life, that she's a vet to the town? And will he pay her respect for not only being two-job holding woman, but will he also fall in love for the woman she is? Or will she be like warding him off, maybe fall in love with Billy Bob, and just so busy that with her vet tech job, I should say, and her bartending that she won't ever marry. Not saying that that's a bad thing either. It's just sometimes your broken heart never mends. Or you never, well, in her case, it's not so much of a broken heart. It's just that she's scared to fall in love. And some people who are scared to fall in love never open themselves up to that possibility of finding love, or stay in a pattern that they're used to. Now with Jared, he's focused on, helping his uncle out. And he sees a lot of things going around him that he's trying to fix and focus on his uncle's health and well-being. But at the same time, he's trying not to fall in love. So they both are trying not to fall in love. The question is, will they? Only way to find out. Stay tuned for more book review. Love y'all.